Good evening, First Assembly. I am Tunisha Hubbard, and tonight we're going to talk about preparing. So we are going to prepare. Come join me. Okay, so prepare. Why would we ever need to prepare? I think we all know, because we've been on the planet more than a few years, and we know that things happen. We can't predict everything. And even when we know things are coming or we can see things are coming, we still have to prepare. And so tonight we're going to talk about preparing, because instead of panicking and being paralyzed, we want to be prepared. So we're going to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 through 6, and see what we can learn about preparation. So that entire passage of scripture is usually titled, Cast Your Bread on the Waters, right? So a lot of translations of the Bible say that. And so we're going to look at it. We're going to break it into three different portions, verses 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6, and talk about what is it telling us about preparing. So verses 1 and 2 tell us to manage our resources wisely. Now, remember, in this passage, when Solomon is teaching, he is just giving wisdom, right? He's not looking at a specific situation that was going on in his lifetime when he's giving this advice. He is just giving advice. This is just things that he's learned over his lifetime, and he's writing it down. So what is he talking about in verses 1 and 2? From the New American Standard Bible, it says, Cast your bread on the surface of the waters, for you will find it after many days. Divide your portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on the earth. Now, cast your bread on the waters and you may find it after many days is obviously not a literal instruction, because if you put bread on water, I'm almost positive you're not going to find it after many days. And if you did, it'll be soggy and horrible, and I don't know what you would want to do with it. So this is obviously a metaphor. This is a proverbial instruction for us. And then if we look at verse 2, which tells us about dividing our portions, it says 7 or even to 8. Now, the 7 even to 8 is a device that Solomon uses a lot, and it's to emphasize something. It's emphasizing that we want to increase the numbers, right? So we want to divide things into many portions. That's the emphasis here. So it's not necessarily specific to the number 7 or 8. It's just many. And the more, the merrier. And it says, because we don't know what is going to happen on the earth. So here, some scholars believe that this passage is talking about generosity, about how the Lord talks to us about taking care of the poor. For example, Proverbs 19:17 says, when you're gracious to the poor, you're lending to the Lord and he will repay you. And so some of this is, again, we're talking about preparing and managing our resources wisely. And one of those things to do is to be generous with our money. When we're generous with not just our money, with all of our resources, with our time, with our energy, with the things that the Lord has given to us, when we're generous with it, we can know, right, based on the principles of the Bible, that those things will come back to us. So we give and then we receive. So we're not just gonna hoard all of our monies. We're not just gonna keep all of our monies to ourselves. And then we go on to verse 2, and we're definitely not gonna keep all of our money in the same place. We're not gonna keep all of our resources in the same place. And now we know, even from just our regular conversations, we know that we don't do that, right? We say it all the time. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. When financial advisors talk to us, they talk about diversifying your portfolio. Right? We talk about these things all the time, constantly. And it's the same idea that Solomon is trying to teach us. He's saying, when you have resources, you don't put them all in the same place. Diversify. You can put things in different places. You put investments here, you put them there. So when he says, cast your bread on the waters, the idea is that you're sending it out into multiple different places, right? You're not keeping it all with you. You're pushing it out so that it can go out and make money for you. It can go out and multiply and then come back to you. After many days, you will find it. That's the concept, is we're not just holding on to things. So we're going to manage our resources wisely. The Bible is not short of information about managing resources, right? We know in Matthew, when they talk about the parable of the talents, right? The ones who were able to invest their talents, they got doubled, right? So the master gave them responsibility over more because they were wise and good stewards. And so this is exactly what Solomon is telling us. We have to manage our resources wisely. Then we go on to verses 3 and 4, which say, if the clouds are full, they pour out rain upon the earth. And whether a tree falls toward the earth or towards the south or towards the north, wherever the tree falls, there it lies. He who watches the wind will not sow, and he who looks at the clouds will not reap. Now, this passage gets very interesting because it's talking about two different things. It's talking about inevitability. Sometimes the things that happen in life are inevitable. And in this aspect, we're going to use information wisely to help us to prepare. We have information. We already know, by this example he gives, we know that when the clouds are dark and heavy, it's going to rain. This is just what happens, and we can't control that. He says if a tree falls, whether it falls to the north or the south, wherever it falls, it's where it's going to stay. Now, to the north or the south gives us a little bit of nuance into this, that even when we can predict how things will happen, there's still a bit of randomness that may happen. So we know that if a tree falls, it will fall. What we can't predict necessarily is in what direction it will fall. But once it falls, we know that that's exactly where it's going to stay, right? So the tree is not going to fall to the north and then all of a sudden move and go to the south. So there are things that we can know, and there's a bit of chance in the things that we don't know, even within what we do know. It's a little bit challenging. But what he is encouraging us to do here, as he talks about the sower, he says the person who is, this is a farming reference. The person who's going to sow, he says, if they look at the wind, they're not going to sow, because the implication here is if the wind is really strong, all the seeds that you put down will just blow away. And if they look at the clouds, they're not going to reap because they don't want all their crops to be soaked in the water, so they won't reap. And so there's a tension there. Scholars haven't completely settled on whether Solomon is saying, be wise and notice that when it is windy, don't sow, and when it is raining, don't reap, or if he is saying that if you keep looking at the sky and if you keep looking at the rain, then you won't do anything. So the tension there that we have to embrace, because both of those things are a reality, is that we have to know, we have to be able to use our information wisely. We have to understand that, yes, the wind can blow away the seeds, but there are also no perfect conditions. And so at some point, we're going to have to take an action. At some point, we're going to have to take a step. We're going to have to sow those seeds. At some point, we're going to have to reap. Otherwise, we'll just be hungry. And so then he's talking about using your information wisely. So when we have information, and we'll get information, we're going to talk a little bit later about how this affects us in today's world. But when we have information, we just need to know that sometimes there are things that we can't control. And even within that, we still have to find the balance between what would be the perfect conditions for us and what is happening, and take action. Then we go on to verses 5 and 6, which say, just as you do not know the path of the wind and how bones are formed in the womb of the pregnant woman, so you do not know the activity of God who makes all things. Sow your seed in the morning and do not be idle in the evening, for you do not know whether morning or evening sowing will succeed, or whether both of them alike will be good. And so here, he's definitely now referencing that there are just some things that we don't understand. We don't understand how babies grow and form and all of that, even with our scientific advances, right? This is not something that we can go back and create in a lab. A baby grows, the baby grows. Bones are formed. All of these things happen. And we don't know all of the hows of that. Our meteorologists can tell us the winds will go this way, they will go that way. And then we get things like tornadoes, which will just hop around, and they'll go here and they'll go there and they'll turn on a dime. And we can't necessarily predict that. These are just things that happen. And so when we're living with this sort of information, when we're living with this sort of of unease and discomfort, what we have to do is, he says, sow your seed in the morning and then sow your seed at night. So in other words, right, this third principle here is we've just got to work hard. We have to put in the work. So you do your work in the morning and you do your work at night, because we can't tell which of these things will ultimately be successful for us. And he said, it might be one or the other, or it may even be both. But again, we can't necessarily predict. We can't say for certain that any actions we take will be successful. So we have to just do both. He says, do it. You work hard and then you leave the rest. So here we're working hard and we're proceeding in faith. Now we're going to look at some examples of Bible characters who prepared, and we'll see what they did and how they used these principles. So we're going to start with Joseph. So Joseph in Genesis chapter 41, this is where the ruler of Egypt had a dream, and it's about the 7 cows and the 7 grains, the 7 heads of corn, and he interprets this dream and he understands from it that there's going to be 7 years of good and then 7 years of famine. And because of that, Joseph recommends to the Pharaoh that he should get a wise man and make a plan and such that they would, the grain that they're getting during the times of plenty, that they'll save about 20% of that. Then they'll, put that aside so that they can use it in the time of famine. Now, the interesting thing about this story is many times we feel like when we think something is going to happen, we feel like the Lord will come and give us very specific instructions. Like we think about Noah in Genesis 6 through 9. We know the story of Noah. God tells him, there's going to be a flood, build an ark, and he gives him every single specification. He tells him how much food, how much ark, exactly how to build this, how to insulate it, how to do all of that. And then we don't necessarily see that happening again in the Bible, right? For Joseph, what Joseph got was the information, which is a famine is coming. And then Joseph made the plan. Joseph suggested the plan, and the Pharaoh said, yes, you do this plan. And so we have to get into the mindset that when we get information, we're not necessarily waiting for all of the details on how to execute it. We can develop a plan based on what we already know. So Joseph already knows what happens in a famine. He knows there's a famine coming. He understands that when there's a famine, that means there's nothing. And so how do you prepare for when there's nothing? In the times when you have, you cut back on how much you use and you save for the future. Now, interestingly enough, that's a concept that we should implement as good stewards anyway. We should not ever live in a way that we're spending everything that we get, right? Saving for the future, because this is what Solomon was saying in Ecclesiastes, that we don't know what the future holds. We don't know what's going to come. And so the way that we insulate ourselves for that is when we have, we save, and we keep it for the future. And then Joseph did the exact same things that Solomon talks about later. He says he executed his plan in faith. So he made a plan and he executed it. He could not know if there would be a fire in the barns, for example, where they were storing up their grain and all of it could be destroyed. He couldn't know that. But unlike the sower that Solomon references, he's not looking at all of the negative possibilities and making that stop him from taking actions. Rather, he's making a plan and he's executing it in faith. He's making a plan in faith that 20% of everything we save for 7 years will be enough to sustain us for another 7 years. So we have to do all of these things. We have to be good stewards. We have to use the information that we have wisely, and we have to proceed in faith and work hard, because this is how our preparations get us from here into the future. We're going to look at David. Now, David wanted to build a tabernacle for the Lord, and the Lord told him no, because he's a warrior, there's a lot of blood on his hands. And then the Lord told him, your son will be the one to build a tabernacle. If we go to 2 Chronicles 22, verses 1 through 5, we'll see David This is at the end of his life. And he's thinking about this tabernacle that he once built for the Lord. And he recognizes that his son, Solomon, who would be his, who would succeed him on the throne, his son is too young and inexperienced to be able to manage this task. And so David starts to prepare. And in this passage of scripture, you'll see David gets stone cutters and he collects all this brass. He collects basically all of the materials that are needed for building the temple, for building the tabernacle. And then he leaves all of this for his son. And again, he is enacting the exact same principles that we're seeing. There's wise management of resources, because he, as the king, he has access to a lot of materials and a lot of people, a lot of resources. And so he uses that to store them up, right? He's got information and he's using it wisely. He's looking at the situation and and in this case, the thing that he's preparing for is not something that the Lord divinely revealed to him in a dream or in a prophecy or anything like that. He's just looking at the situation of his life and he goes, my son is young and he doesn't have experience. Therefore, I need to do what I need to do to make him successful. So what he's doing is using his information wisely in order to determine how he needs to prepare. And then he prepares. And then we go on to the last part. Once again, he is proceeding in faith and he's working hard. And he is proceeding in faith because he has no way to determine after he dies what Solomon will do with the materials that he saved up, right? He can't determine that Solomon wouldn't decide to build himself a really big house. He just trusts that this is the plan, and I put the plan into motion, and then I have to leave the success of that plan in the hands of the Lord. And so this is how we prepare. We've got one final example. Agabus, this is in the New Testament. In Acts chapter 11, verses 27 through 30, we see that there's a group of prophets that come, and Agabus is the one who predicts a famine. Now, this is a very, very short scripture. It doesn't give us a lot of detailed information. But we know that this group received a prophetic utterance that there would be a famine, and they made a plan. But their plan was not to just take care of themselves. Their plan was to take care of their people in Judea. So those disciples who were there at the time, they gave what they could in order to help sustain the Judeans. So they were giving out of what they had right then in order to prepare for the future, so that the other believers in Judea would be able to survive. And so again, we see the same principles, right? Right back to the same things. We've got wise stewardship. We've got wise use of information. And then we've got a plan that is enacted in faith, and we put in the work to make the plan work. So now, how does all of this apply to us? What do we do with this information in today's world? Now, we don't know that there's a famine coming, although today we have so much information, we have so many things going on, and so many people feel a sense of dread and doom, and that things are difficult and things are only going to become more difficult. And so we have this sort of tension about the future where we don't understand, where we can't see clearly what is going to happen. Now, if in your situation you feel like the Lord has, if you're a Noah, and the Lord has told you there's going to be a problem and this is all that you need to do, easy, just do it. It's not going to be easy in the sense that sometimes when we're following the Lord and others don't agree, it's difficult for us to stay on the path. But if the Lord has given you specific directions, take those directions and go with it. If you do not have information that there is absolutely something negative coming in the future, or if you believe that something negative is coming in the future and you don't know what to do, this is where we go back to the plan that Solomon has laid out for us. This is where we go back to, we're just going to be good stewards. We're not going to panic. We're not going to freak out. We're not going to just go running around crazy. We're going to do the things that make sense. Whether or not the future is bright or gray, we should be good stewards. And so we're going to do that. And in the ways that we could be good stewards starts with let's take care of our physical bodies, right? And none of this is going to be earth shattering. None of this is going to be something so spiritual that you've never heard it before. But this is exactly what makes sense. We're going to take care of our physical bodies. We're going to maintain our health. We're going to eat properly, exercise, sleep adequately, because we know from scientific research that these are the things that help us to withstand stress. These are the things that help to sustain us when things become difficult. If your physical body is healthy, then you can withstand, you can endure a lot of things and a lot better. So we're going to take care of our physical bodies. We are going to maintain relationships with our friends and family, because healthy relationships they help to sustain us. They help to sustain us socially. They help to sustain us emotionally. These relationships have way more impact on our lives than we can imagine. Those of us who have lived through COVID, we know that disconnect could create some tensions within our lives. So we must maintain those relationships. And then we can also know that relationships will pay dividends in the end. Sometimes things happen and we need people. Just imagine if you were in a situation where you needed some water, but you don't talk to any of your neighbors. None of them know you. None of them know who you are. Then you have no one to go and say, oh my gosh, may I have a cup of water? Now you're dying of thirst and you have no one that you can say, please give me a cup of water. And on the other hand, if your neighbor is suffering and you have water, you can give it to them, right? They can feel free to come to you. This relationships matter. So we need to build and maintain healthy relationships with our friends and families. We need to make sure that we have community. We need to make sure we have connections. And of course, this includes gathering with believers, like-minded believers, where you can talk about the things that are going on and encourage each other in your faith as well as in life in general. Then, of course, we have finances. How do we manage our finances? The same way all of our financial experts have been trying to tell us. Do you have an emergency fund? Make sure your emergency fund has enough money. Make sure you have, to where you can control this, multiple streams of income are great. They make perfect sense, because if one stream cuts off, then we have other places that we can get income. And again, those things will help us to ward off our stress. It will help us to be able to move forward, to be able to sit calmly and make a plan. Save, always have savings, cut back spending where possible. Pay off debts. Debt paid off is great. It's a great feeling when you pay off your debts. And so we're going to work towards those things. And again, we're talking about preparing, right? And we are preparing. These preparation principles work whether we know something is coming or we don't know something is coming. The idea of preparing is so that we want to take actions that gets us to a future that we desire. So if we desire to be prosperous in our future, then we need to prepare for that. If we don't care what our future looks like, then we don't need to prepare. But preparing is the right way to go, especially if we're concerned about what's going to happen in the future. We can prepare. And then, of course, we're going to prepare spiritually. And what does that mean? First of all, you have to be saved. A spiritually healthy person is a person who believes in Christ, is a person who has given their heart to Christ. And then that person continues to grow in their relationship with the Lord by praying, by studying the word, by congregating with other believers, right? So in order to be spiritually healthy, we have to be connected to the source, and the Lord is the source. And the way we connect to the Lord is through Jesus, right? Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father but by me. So that connection has to be in place in order for us to be spiritually healthy. And then all these other things kind of flow, they help, they grow, the Lord working on our side helps us to be prosperous in just about everything else that we put our hands to. And then, of course, we're going to make a plan, we're going to execute our plan, right? We have to work our plan in faith. We have to take steps. We have to take actions. And this can be very challenging when we're looking at a future, when we're looking at situations, when we're thinking, oh my gosh, I need a job, but the price of gas is so high. Well, we can't just stay home because the price of gas is high. We have to go to work. And so we're going to make a plan. We're going to start talking, and we're going to start looking at our finances. We're going to look at our budget. We're going to take actions in faith, right? We're going to put our plans to the Lord, because the Bible says, right, we can make plans as the Lord is the one who establishes it. We're going to make our plan. We're going to put it in front of the Lord, and we're going to let him have his way. And Solomon addressed this, right? He said, there's things that we just can't control because we don't know what God is going to do. However, we still make a plan. We still step out in faith. We still do the hard work. And so, regardless of how you're feeling today, regardless of what the future looks like for you, preparing is the way to go. If you're stressed, you prepare. If you think things are going to be great, you still prepare. If you can look at it and logically see that there are challenges up ahead, you prepare. So we are going to prepare. We're going to manage our resources wisely. We're going to use the information that we have wisely. And then we're going to enact our plan. We're going to create a plan, enact it, and work hard at it. We're going to do all of this in faith. We're going to give it all to the Lord so that our future is in his hands and not just ours. So that concludes my presentation for tonight. We would love to see you out on a Sunday morning for our 10:30 service. We invite you out to Sunday school. We have Sunday school at 9:15 for children and adults. And then, of course, we have an in-person Bible study on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. So we would love to see you. Come out, have a wonderful week, and don't forget to tell someone about Jesus.